Hey guys, today I want to discuss a very important topic. It's not going to be a positive topic. This is going to be a very negative video, and I don't like making negative videos about Linux and the open source community, but this one needs to be made. The Linux community. The Linux community is toxic and poisonous. We are destroying ourselves from within. We are our own worst enemies. I know so many people that have worked for various open source projects that have ended up leaving those projects because how they were treated by the community within that project. I know a lot of YouTubers, Linux YouTubers, have quit doing their YouTube channels because how they were treated by the Linux community. I know two come to mind in particular. I know for sure that they weren't treated real well making Linux YouTube videos, so they just quit making them altogether. And there's no telling how many others that we don't know about. I mean, there's a lot of Linux YouTube channels out there that are now no longer active. They're dead. Why did those people quit making those videos? Why did they quit doing their channel? Well, they may have other life commitments, or they may have just got burnt out. I mean, it is a real job making these kinds of videos. But a lot of them probably just got tired of some of the trolls, some of the hostility, some of the angry elitist comments toward themselves. So a lot of people, when you start attacking their person or attacking their work, they're going to just quit. They're just going to go back to doing whatever they were doing before that. I've even heard of just your regular Linux user, just your regular Linux desktop user, quit using Linux as their operating system and go back to Windows and Mac because they did not like the way the Linux community treated them, especially in support aspects. I've heard of, especially newer Linux users, you're just coming from Windows, you've only spent a few weeks or a few months in Linux, and you go to one of the Linux support channels, a Linux forum or Stack Exchange, IRC chat channel, whatever. And they go to ask a support question. Hey, how do I do this? Hey, how do I fix this? This is broken. And they get a less than helpful response, such as, hey, noob, why don't you know how? This is so easy. Or, hey, go RTFM. RTFM. Read the effing manual. Telling someone to read the manual, why did you even bother typing that? You may as well have not offered them any support at all if your only support is RTFM. It would have been much helpful if it's such a simple solution, just to go ahead and type the solution rather than RTFM, or at least link to where in the wiki the solution to his problem is. That's much more helpful. Telling somebody to read the manual is basically just giving them the finger and telling them to go jump and rotate. So we're not treating especially new Linux users well on our forums and our IRC chat channels. We really need to be mindful of the way we act. I mentioned a lot of people that are working on open source projects end up leaving those projects because of the way they're treated within their own communities. I mean, look at the way the FreeBSD community is acting right now due to the whole Huggate thing, where the FreeBSD guys wanted to create this new code of conduct, basically pushing some, political ideology. Whoever wrote this thing is some social justice warrior that really wanted to use the FreeBSD platform as a way of promoting his ideology. That's not the correct venue for this sort of thing. If you really want to promote a certain political ideology or political point of view, Linux and the open source community or the BSD community is not the place for that. you should have went into politics, government politics. You should be a community activist. This is not the sort of place for that thing. Your codes of conduct should not interject politics. Code of conduct should be very general. If you're going to have one, a code of conduct basically should read something like this. Hey, don't be a jackass. If you are, we're going to boot you. That's a code of conduct. Once you start really getting into detailed political ideological stuff, you should basically not have a code of conduct. If your code of conduct is going to interject politics, it's best not to have one at all. You really don't need a code of conduct for most of these projects anyway. It's basic common sense. We know how to treat others as human beings. You do not need to have a code of conduct telling me, not to physically assault somebody or verbally assault somebody. Every human being on the planet knows not to do that. So a code of conduct, it's best just not even to have one. If you're going to have one, make that thing very, very generalized. The elitist attitudes we have is another problem. Why we end up sending, especially new users to Linux, running back to Windows and Mac. Just because you were able to get through a Linux install, you are not superior to the person that's still running Microsoft Windows or Mac OS. You are not some special snowflake because you were able to get through, that Fedora install. You're not. And even within Linux itself, we make fun of each other. Just because you were able to get through an Arch install, you are not superior to that guy running Ubuntu. And I get this all the time. I make videos on hundreds of different distros. And when I first started this channel, my main production machine that I was making these videos on was running the Ubuntu LTS. I actually bought this computer with Ubuntu pre-installed, I think, the LTS. It didn't come with Windows. I try not to buy machines with Windows, just on the principle of the matter. But I like the Ubuntu LTS. It's stable, it's solid. And, I get comments, hey, why are you running Ubuntu? Especially like from young kids that are new to Linux. They just installed Arch Linux and they think they're really something special. Hey, Ubuntu noob, why don't you install a real distro? Or, install a real desktop environment or window manager. Why are you running GNOME or KDE? Install i3. And I want to tell some of these like 14, 15-year-old kids that are telling me that I'm an Ubuntu noob and I need to install Arch. I was doing Arch installs when some of these kids were in diapers. That's how long I've been using Linux. Don't make fun of people that are using a noob distro just because somebody's running Ubuntu or Elementary or Mint or something like that. For one thing, you have no idea what kind of Linux experience they have. When you go to like Linux conferences, gatherings of like serious Linux people, like programmers, coders, developers, maintainers, people that actually create Linux distros, you would be shocked at how many of them are using these noob distros. You see a lot of Ubuntu installs. You do not see a lot of these people running something like Gentoo. Why? It's not because they can't install Gentoo. Most of them have done Gentoo installs before and Arch installs. Why do they choose to run something like Ubuntu? Because it works and it's easy to install. Because they've got more important things to do because they're actually working on stuff. They can't be bothered with, the kind of time that it takes to install something like Arch or Gentoo and maintain something like Arch and Gentoo. So be careful when you start throwing around terms like, hey, you Ubuntu noob. You have no idea what that person's background is, especially, and it tends to be the teenagers on the forums and the chats that throw these things around. Some of these people have been using Linux longer than you've been alive. And when you look around, like the YouTube channels, the kind of foolishness that goes on, I don't get a lot of trolls on my channel. I get the occasional troll that, wants to say I'm an idiot or my videos stink. You don't know what you're doing. But I ignore the trolls. The trolls really don't bother me personally. I mentioned other people. It bothers them a lot and they end up getting frustrated and leaving. I don't mind them too much, but one thing you notice when you go to videos on how to use Windows or Mac or channels even dedicated to Windows and Mac, there's no trolls there. Nobody is trying to belittle that guy that is doing that Windows tutorial. It doesn't happen. Everybody seems to be friendly. There's no snobbishness, no elitist attitude. What is different in the Linux community compared to, say, the Windows and Mac communities? We really need to examine ourselves. Something is going on here. And one of the things that I think drives this elitist attitude is, I mentioned being principled because I bought a computer that didn't come with Windows pre-installed. I chose to buy a computer that had Linux pre-installed. And that's a good thing. Being principled is good. But being a jackass is not good. When you see somebody buying a machine with Windows or Mac, or even worse, in the Linux community, you see this all the time. People running Linux, but they have to run proprietary software. Some of them have to run, say, Microsoft Office because of their work, or Adobe Photoshop. They have to maybe have a Windows VM to run some of these Windows-only programs, or try to run them in Wine. And you see these free software, open source software Nazis that just belittle these people. You don't have to use this stuff. You could get away from it if you really wanted to. No, people that live in a work in a corporate environment and have to run something like Microsoft Office because the 2,000 other people that work in this office building all use Microsoft Office. Yes, they actually do need to run Microsoft Office. They do not need you to belittle them or to tell them they're some kind of sellout for running proprietary software. You need to understand their situation. Also, these free software Nazis, I sometimes wonder about these people. How many of you guys are actually running a Linux distro like Triskel or GNU-Sense? Are you running one of the official, free software distros? That is sponsored by, GNU and Richard Stallman. If you're not running something like Triskel and you're not running the Nouveau drivers for your graphics card, you have absolutely no business telling other people, not to use proprietary software, because I promise you, very, very few of you are using the open source drivers on your machines. So just stop with all that nonsense. Also, some of the free software Nazis out there. How many of you are actually contributing anything? Are you contributing anything at all to the Linux and open source movement? Are you contributing code? Are you contributing artwork, documentation, videos like some of the stuff I make? Are you giving support? Support in chat, forums. How many of you serve as moderators on some of these forums? How many of you donate money? Do you support open source projects financially in any way? Maybe some of you donate server space. Even the really little stuff. How many of you send bug reports? How many of you seed torrents? That very long list of things I just mentioned of ways you can contribute. Some of these free and open source Nazis out there don't do any of these things. Yet they're the ones that are out there the loudest, talking smack. Just be quiet. If you're not contributing to Linux and open source in any way at all, just stop talking. And finally, there's always going to be some trolls out there. There just are. You can't stop them. My advice is really, don't take anything personal on the internet. I don't. The people that comment, that make snarky comments to me on YouTube or wherever out on the internet, I don't take it personal, because when you take things personal, you get angry. Think about it. Every time you get angry at anything in life, every single time you get angry, it's because you took something personal. When you quit taking things personal, you're never angry. It's a life tip. And, anger leads to hate. Hate leads to violence. Of course, we're dealing through the internet most of the time, so maybe not physical violence, but still, don't take things personal. And then also, the attention we get in the press, the Linux community, we get a bad rap because of the negative stuff always garners more attention than the positive. Now, we can try to put a spotlight on all the great things in the open source community. I know I need to do a better job of spotlighting the really good stuff that goes on out there in the free software and open source communities. But at the end of the day, it's the negative stuff that makes the headlines. That's just the nature of it. There's nothing we can do about that. The best thing we can do, though, is to reduce all those toxic and poisonous things that are going on in our communities. How do we do that? Well, free and open source projects all the time have these things that they call paper cuts, paper cut fixes, where they have 100 paper cut mission or 1,000 paper cut mission, where paper cuts basically are these like small little bugs within your UI that, one paper cut doesn't really hurt you, but 100 or 1,000 really hurt. So my proposal for the Linux community, the open source community in general, all open source projects, have a 1 million paper cut campaign. Except instead of focusing on your open source project as far as coding, this 1 million paper cut campaign should be geared toward your communities, the community aspect of your project. It should be aimed at the people within your project. Start identifying those problems within your communities early. Find the obnoxious jackasses that are driving people away from your projects and from the open source community as a whole. Do not put such people in positions of authority, no matter how talented they may be. Maybe they're just a fantastic programmer, or, can do some amazing artwork, or whatever it is they're doing for your project. Someone that can contribute just massive amounts of code, but brings their divisive ideology and this diarrhea of the mouth mentality. They're going to do far more harm to your project than the good they could do. So take it upon yourselves, you and the Linux community. 1 million paper cuts. Start identifying the problems within your community. Even if some of those problems are at the very, very top of your projects, we really need to get a hold of this before it tears us apart. Peace, guys.